Welcome to the channel. The layer of unusual ash on that island is so thick that the soil is still blacker than anywhere else. The sea was motionless, like glass, but the fog above it was breathing, alive, dense, as if waiting for someone. The boat slowly cut through the white gloom, and the sound of the engine seemed muffled, viscous, as if the air did not want to let the noise through. Laura Vigna stood by the side, gripping the cold metal with her fingers. In 20 minutes of travel, she had seen nothing but a grey curtain. Neither Venice, left behind, nor the horizon. Only water, whiteness, and that suffocating smell, of damp salt and old iron. "A little over a mile left," said the captain, a grey-haired man with a face etched by the wind. He spoke quietly, but his voice seemed to drown in the fog. "Then you will go on your own." He glanced at the woman, attentive, with anxiety. "I don't go closer to the island, Signora." "You promised to deliver us," Laura reminded him, trying to make her voice sound firm. "I promised to deliver, nearby," he snapped. "No one approaches Poveglia. No one. Not even fishermen." On the back deck, the operator Marco was checking the equipment. His camera glistened with drops of fog. He was about 10 years younger than Laura, energetic, a skeptic, a man who believed neither in ghosts nor in bad energy. "Signora," he intervened, smiling. "We are filming a documentary project, not a horror. We need facts, not legends. Legends are also facts." Laura replied, without turning around. "Just of a different kind." She looked again into the white silence ahead. Somewhere there, amidst this unnatural stillness, lay the island of Poveglia. A place where Italian authorities forbade entry. A place where, according to rumors, the ashes and bones of 100,000 people who died of the plague still lie underground. And a place where, as the old people said, the bell rings at night, although the tower has long been empty. "When were you here last?" Laura asked the captain. He paused. Then he answered. "It was a long time ago. I was a boy. My father took doctors there. It was after the war." "After the war?" Marco was surprised. "But the hospital closed in the 60s. "Yes," the captain nodded. "It was already standing empty then. Only the wind. Only screams, if you believe those who were there." He crossed himself, not looking at them. "If you hear the bell, don't go to it." "Never." Laura did not answer. She knew, the more people are afraid, the stronger the viewer's interest grows. And yet, his words echoed with a chill in her chest. When the boat stopped, the fog became thicker, almost tangible. The shadow of the island emerged before them, blurry, colorless. A piece of land surrounded by silence. No birds, no wind. Only a rare splash of water, as if someone invisible was moving beneath the surface. "Here it is, Poveglia," the captain said and sharply cut the engine speed. "You go on from here." He handed them a rubber boat and turned away. "Will you stay?" Marco asked. "I will wait 3 hours, no more. If you don't return, I leave." 3 hours is not enough, Laura objected. "I can't stay longer," the captain said. "You can't stay here." He fell silent, then added quietly, almost a whisper. "The island doesn't like strangers." The shore met them with a rotten smell. The sand was gray, streaked with black ash. Crumbles of bones sparkled in the mud, like fragments of shells. On land, ruins, stone walls entwined with ivy, abyss-like windows where only shadows lived. Everything around seemed to be in frozen time. No sounds, except for the distant noise of the water. "This is strange," Marco whispered, turning on the camera. "Even the seagulls aren't flying. There is no life here." Laura said. "Because there is too much death." They walked along an overgrown path. The stones under their feet crumbled, the air thickened. Ahead, the bell tower was visible, tall, warped, with a black hole instead of a bell. Once, the alarm was rung here, warning of ships infected with the plague. Now it was silent. Laura stopped, pointing the microphone upwards. The wind swept over the stones, rustling the foliage. And in this pause, in the very depth of the fog, she imagined a quiet, drawn-out sound, metallic, barely audible. A chime, as if from another era. "Did you hear that sound of the bell?" Laura asked. Marco listened closely. "Nothing. Maybe it reflected off the water. Or maybe it just seemed so." He laughed, but the laugh sounded strained. They reached the ruins of the hospital. The entrance was half collapsed, moisture ran down the walls. On the floor, scraps of paper, rusty beds, pieces of ceramic. The smell of dampness mixed with something else sweetish, almost rotten. Laura turned on the flashlight. The beam of light cut through the darkness and hit a door with a peeling sign, "Psychiatric Ward." "There it is," she said quietly. "The source of the legends." They went inside. The corridor was long, narrow, like a throat. On both sides, rooms with broken-out doors. On the walls, traces of rust, resembling brown streaks of blood. Laura walked first, recording the sound of footsteps. Suddenly the flashlight flickered, and the light went out. "Why?" "The battery is new." The flashlight blinked once more, and turned on. And in that same second Laura noticed movement at the end of the corridor. Instantaneous, like a flash, a shadow, flitting behind the door. "Someone is there," she said. "It can't be," replied Marco and raised the camera. "Nobody lives here." But in the lens, for a fraction of a second, a silhouette slipped through, white, thin, as if scorched by light. They rushed forward, but behind the door it was empty. Only the wind was flapping the curtain, and water was dripping from the ceiling. When they went back out into the courtyard, the fog thickened. The captain still hadn't given the signal. The sun, if it was anywhere above them, did not penetrate the white veil. Laura took out the voice recorder and said into it, "Poveglia Island. Day 1. The place is completely abandoned. Atmosphere, unnatural silence. First impressions, the sound of a bell, recorded by the microphone, and a visual effect, a silhouette in the building. Acoustic illusion is possible. But the feeling, as if the island is watching." She turned off the voice recorder and looked up. On the bell tower, amidst the fog, something dark appeared for a moment, a person or just a reflection. And then Laura felt for the first time, Poveglia is not just a place. Poveglia is first mentioned in records from the 9th century. Back then it was a small, quiet island, where fishermen and monks lived, hiding from barbarian raids. But already in the 13th century it became a place of exile, Venetians who had lost their homes after wars were resettled here. That is, from the very beginning, Poveglia was associated with alienation, a place where people are banished. Gradually, residents left, and those remaining began to tell stories that at night, voices of the drowned could be heard over the water. Thus, the first layer of legends was born, about how the island does not accept the living, that this is the land in between. When the plague devastated Europe in the 14th century, Venice decided to use Poveglia as a quarantine island. Any ship where infected people were found was sent here, without the right to leave it. First, the sick were housed here, then they began burning bodies, right on the spot. Chronicles say that up to 160,000 people died on the island. The earth became saturated with ash, dust, blood. Even today, archaeologists claim, the soil layer on Poveglia is indeed unusually rich in organic matter, up to 60% human ash. Local fishermen recounted that their nets often pulled up fragments of bones. Thus arose the expression that the old men in the lagoon pronounced with superstitious horror, "The fish from Poveglia feed on people." In the 1920s, 1930s, Italian authorities decided to use the island again, this time as a psychiatric clinic. It was then that Poveglia finally received the status of a cursed place. According to rumors, cruel experiments were conducted in the hospital, lobotomies without anesthesia, electroshock therapy, isolation. Local residents claimed that patients screamed at night, and doctors justified this as psychoses. The chief physician, whose name was not preserved in the archives but whom the people nicknamed Dr. Devil, said he heard voices of the dead calling him from the bell tower. In the end, he died. He fell from the tower, but eyewitnesses swore that someone pushed him. Later, a silhouette in a white coat began to be seen on the tower, and the bell, long since removed, seemed to ring by itself. After this, the hospital was closed. And the island was permanently forbidden to visit. In official documents, Poveglia is listed as property of the Ministry of Health, but in practice, no one returns from there. Since the early 2000s, Poveglia has entered the lists of the most terrifying places on the planet. Stalkers, bloggers, ghost hunters secretly made their way there. Many claim they heard moans, saw figures in white, felt a vibration, as if the earth were breathing. One American cameraman, filming there in 2012, recounted that the camera recorded a voice pronouncing his name, in Italian, although no one on the team knew the language. Thus, Poveglia turned into a myth, a symbol of how the past refuses to die. They say that the island of Poveglia has never known peace. First, exiles. Then, the infected. Then, the insane. And all this on a piece of land saturated with the ashes of human bones. Maybe evil is not spirits, but memory. And if memory is not let go, it becomes alive. The night on Poveglia passed in a restless half-sleep. Laura sat by the fire, lit in an iron barrel, listening to the wind creeping along the walls of the old hospital. Marco fell asleep, his face pressed against the camera. Its red indicator blinked in the darkness, like the island's only living eye. The flame flickered, reflecting in the broken glass. Somewhere inside the buildings, sounds were heard, vague, like distant footsteps. Laura decided it was the wind. Or mice. Or memory. She opened her notebook and spread out old copies of archival documents before her, yellowed sheets, printouts from Venetian libraries. Thus began her favorite part, the excavation of the past. Laura read aloud, slowly, as if the words themselves carried weight. Those arriving from the ship Santa Lucia are placed on Poveglia Island for isolation. Among them, 37 people showing signs of the plague. The bodies of the deceased are to be cremated on site, so as not to allow spread, she imagined. Hot pyres, fog, hundreds of doomed people, locked on a patch of land. A vessel with a red flag approaches the island, and a bell rings, not a church bell, but the very one that warns, the contagion is coming. Since then, the bell became the voice of Poveglia. From the letter of the monk Paolo Mori, 1805, at night, weeping is heard emanating from there. We believe that the souls of those who were not given last rites are seeking their way. Brother Adelmo, who returned from the island, fell ill with a fever, and before death whispered that the dead there, they are not silent, they call. According to legend, the layer of ash there is so thick that the soil is still blacker than anywhere else in the lagoon. They say, the ground on Poveglia is warmer to the touch even in winter. In the morning, the fog slightly dispersed, revealing the remains of the old bridge. Laura decided to explore the far part of the island, where, according to maps, the quarantine hospital buildings were located. Marco didn't want to go, but he took the camera anyway. The path led through an overgrown garden, where trees grew directly out of the stone slabs. On one of the slabs, Laura noticed a barely legible inscription, "Rest to the dead." She ran her finger over the letters, and at that moment a sound came from behind the wall, a dull thud, as if someone had dropped something heavy. Marco froze. Inside the hospital, the air was different. Thick, heavy. On the walls, remnants of frescoes, underfoot, scattered patient cards. Laura picked one up. It read, "A. Bellini legend says that the doctor conducted experiments. Lobotomies, electroshocks. He claimed to hear the voices of the sick even after their death. In the end, he went mad himself and threw himself from the bell tower. Although..." Laura looked up. "Some believe he was thrown." Marco pointed the camera at the tower. The sun barely broke through the clouds, and the top of the bell tower glowed with a reddish light. During the day, they found an old laboratory, a room with the remains of a table, broken flasks, and a wall covered in rust stains. On the floor, an iron mask, similar to the face part of a plague costume, but without the beak. Laura picked it up, the metal was worn. "Look," she said. "Modern steel. This is already the 20th century. Someone returned here recently," Marco noted. "Maybe searchers, stalkers." But inside, a feeling had already settled in both of them. Whoever came here, he did not leave. When the sun was setting, they settled in the former chapel. In the corner, among the debris of the altar, stood a wooden statue of the Virgin Mary without a head. Laura turned on the dictaphone. Poveglia. Day 2. Recording in the quarantine hospital building. Patient cards, a mask, fragments of laboratory instruments found. Confirmation of the legend about the doctor who died on the tower. Atmosphere, a feeling of presence. Possibly, psychoacoustic effects from the enclosed space. Suddenly the dictaphone hissed. A hum, similar to a human voice, came from the speaker, but the words were indistinct. Laura exchanged glances with Marco. She pressed rewind, turned it on again. First, crackling. Then barely audible, "Don't go there," Laura translated. When darkness fell, they heard the bell again. Quiet, like breathing. Not loud, but distinct. The ringing came from the direction of the tower. Although Laura had seen during the day, it was empty inside, the bell removed decades ago. She stood up. The sound was too rhythmic. 3 strikes, a pause, 3 more. And in each, like the echo of a foreign heart. Marco turned on the camera. In the lens, the tower. And for a second, between flashes of fog, they both saw someone standing right at the top. A figure, in a long white robe. The face was indistinguishable. Only a shadow. The bell struck again. This time, right inside her head. And Laura felt, the island was breathing, like a living creature. And whispering to her, not with a voice, but with all the space around, "You didn't come to film. You came to remember." The fire in the barrel went out when they returned to the camp. Marco's camera blinked and turned off. On the tape, as it turned out later, the recording cut off exactly at the moment when the shadow on the tower disappeared. And in the dictaphone, which lay at Laura's feet, there was a quiet rustling, as if someone on the other side of the tape was still breathing. The fog hadn't lifted for 3 days. It seemed to have settled between the trees, entangled the ruins, and even clouded their thoughts. Laura woke up to a strange sound, as if someone was quietly whispering right next to her ear. Opening her eyes, she saw that the dictaphone was glowing with a red light. Recording had been running all night. She pressed stop, rewound it. First, rustling, the crackling of the wind. Then, barely audible words. A female voice, low, trembling, "Don't go down." Laura sat motionless for a long time until Marco woke up. Strangeness again? He asked sleepily. Someone was talking at night. There's no one here but us. She didn't tell him that the voice sounded too close. Too recognizable. As if it were her own voice, only from another time. By noon they decided to film the voiceover segment, that very historical part about Poveglia's past. Marco set up the camera near the ruined wall where a cross once hung. Laura stood in front of the lens, her face pale, her lips trembling slightly, but her voice firm. Poveglia Island, part of the Venetian lagoon. Fishermen once lived here, then plague victims were brought here. Marco stopped the recording, nodded. Perfect. But let's re-record the part about the doctor. The background wave sound is too strong. I didn't talk about the doctor, said Laura. What do you mean you didn't? I didn't say the last sentence. They listened to the tape again. And indeed, the voice said, "He died, falling from the bell tower," it said twice. The second time, duller, slower, as if someone repeated after her. Towards evening, Marco decided to walk around the tower. Laura stayed at the camp, sorting through the recordings. She opened the laptop, listened to the night audio file once more, and noticed something strange. In some places, the sound fluctuated at a frequency resembling a heartbeat. When she amplified the signal, voices emerged between the noises, dozens, like a choir. And they all repeated the same phrase, weaving into the sound of the wind, "Everyone is burning." For a second, it seemed to her that the speakers emitted the smell of burning. She sharply closed the laptop lid. Marco returned an hour later. He was agitated. "I found a tunnel," he said. "An old door under the tower. It's closed, but a staircase leads there. Did you go down there?" "No. It's dark. Too damp." Something is dripping there and there's a sound, as if someone is breathing. Maybe it's ventilation. In a century-old dungeon. He smirked, but a shadow flickered in his eyes. Tomorrow we'll go together. Laura didn't object. But that night she wrote in her diary, "It seems Poveglia doesn't want us to film. It seems to choose the moments when to speak, and when to be silent. And its silence sounds louder than screams." That night she heard rustling again. This time, from the direction of the old hospital. Lantern, camera, dictaphone, and she went there, cautiously, trying not to look into the darkness for too long. The corridor they had walked through during the day now seemed different. The walls were breathing. Shadows moved slowly, as if watching her. In one of the wards, a flash of light. Laura froze. It was the screen of an old monitor, dimly flickering. Although there was no electricity here. On the screen, an image. Black and white, shaky, as if filmed long ago, a room similar to the one where she stood. On the cot, a person in bandages, face covered. The silhouette of a man in a white coat appears in the frame, leaning towards the patient. And whispers, "Look at me, and the pain will go away." Then, a sharp screech, the screen goes dark. Laura dropped the dictaphone. When she picked it up, it was still recording. The recording captured her ragged breath and a deep male voice, "Don't turn off the light." In the morning, Marco couldn't believe what he heard. "There is no electricity here, Laura." "None." But the screen was lit. "It means a glitch. Reflection, camera flash, anything." He spoke quickly, like a person convincing himself, not her. To distract themselves, they decided to film a wide shot of the island. Laura climbed the slope from where all of Poveglia was visible. Roofs, the tower, remnants of the wall emerged from the fog. She spoke off camera, "They say that those who die on Poveglia do not leave. Their ashes are absorbed into the earth, their voices, into the wind, their fear, into the water. Maybe the island isn't cursed, but simply overpopulated with memory. And everyone who comes here becomes part of that memory." Marco filmed silently. When she finished, he lowered the camera. "Don't you think you're talking about it as if it were alive? And can something not alive remember so much?" In the evening they returned to the camp. At sunset, the fog turned reddish, and it seemed as if the air itself was pulsating. Laura was reviewing the materials when she noticed a new video, a file she hadn't filmed. Title, Bellini_1932.mov, on the screen, a shaky image. A man in hospital clothes, his face tormented. He sits on the cot and whispers, looking into the camera, he is not a doctor. He listens. He listens to all of us. If you see this, don't stay here tonight. The video lasted 20 seconds. Then, noise, a flash, and the frame dissolves into white light. Laura recoiled in horror. Marco walked over, looked at the screen, and turned pale. This is impossible. Why? Because this tape, he stopped, looked at the tripod. I filmed our daytime take on it. Laura slowly turned to him. So, the 1932 video recorded over yours? He nodded. Outside, the bell struck. Exactly 3 times. And silence again. That night neither of them slept. Every rustle seemed like a step, every breath of wind, a word. Laura turned on the dictaphone and whispered, Poveglia is speaking. But I'm not sure who she is answering. In the background of the recording, a quiet echo. First a whisper, then that very breathing they heard from the basement. And suddenly, a female voice, clear, cold, "Laura, come down." She turned off the dictaphone. Marco looked at her. "What does that mean?" "It means, tomorrow we are going down." The morning began with silence. Not the usual kind, not the one when the wind dies down. It was a silence, deep, viscous, as if the air had absorbed the sound and was not going to give it back. Laura woke up first. Marco slept restlessly, his hands twitched, his lips whispered something inaudible. She quietly approached, and heard, that very word. "Come down." She stepped back, the cold pierced her to the bone. The tower stood motionless in the fog at its base, half hidden by bushes. Laura found a rusty door, heavy, with hinges rusted green. Nearby lay a sign with the inscription, "Entry forbidden." Marco approached, carrying a lantern. He pushed the door. The metal groaned. A cold draft came from inside, thick, damp, like the breath of the deep. The staircase smelled of burning and something metallic, as if rust and blood had merged into one taste. They descended slowly. Every step echoed, as if they were treading on the island's internal organs. The walls were lined with brick, covered in mold. Sometimes something white glimmered in the cracks, bone. Salt. After 20 steps the staircase ended, opening into a low corridor. The floor was flooded in places, the murky water reflected the lantern light like a liquid mirror. Faded letters were visible on the wall, "Department Experiments." "There it is," whispered Laura. "The underground section of the hospital." "Who would doubt it?" muttered Marco. "Let's film it, and get out quickly." He turned on the camera. The lens blinked with a red light, and a moment later a sound hissed in Laura's headphones, as if someone was responding to the recording being turned on. First quiet, then louder and louder. Whispering. Many voices. Words surfaced from the depth of the noise, as if someone was speaking through water. Look at us." Marco stopped. In one of the rooms stood iron beds, bent, with restraints. On the floor, rusty instruments, as if someone had thrown them in a hurry. And in the corner, a large glass tank, half broken. Inside, water, murky, but something white showed in the depth. Laura leaned closer, shining the lantern. At first it seemed like rags. But then, she distinguished a human hand. Fingers, shriveled, like old wax. On the wrist, a metal tag inscribed, "Bellini A." Marco sharply recoiled. Laura felt everything inside contract. The island doesn't just store the past. It reproduces it. Like an old recording that can be played again. Further on, another door. An antique lock, but not locked. They entered, and found themselves in a narrow hall. On the wall, an inscription in charcoal, "Don't forget." In the middle of the room stood a table. On it, a notebook, blackened with age. Laura opened it. The first pages, lists of names. Then, entries, "The voices are getting stronger." Patients talk to the walls. "Tonight they spoke my name. I must find out what they want. If I can hear them, I can calm them." "This is a doctor's diary," said Laura. The last entry was written in a trembling hand: "They are calling me upstairs. They say the bell is waiting. If I don't return, it means I have become one of them." Laura placed her palm on the page. The paper was cold, like metal. And suddenly she imagined, a hum was coming from under the book. She listened closely. Not just a sound. A heartbeat. First faint, then louder and louder. And then, a voice. Male, low, as if sounding from the earth itself: "You are reading my diary. That means yours is here now too." Marco recoiled, the lantern trembled. That can't be. But in the same second another voice came from the corner of the room, female, quiet, familiar: "Laura, leave." And she recognized it. Her own. Laura straightened up sharply, but the voices did not subside. They came from everywhere, from the walls, from the floor, from her own head. Dozens, hundreds of voices, mixed like wind, full of alien memories. She covered her ears, but the sounds did not disappear. Images flashed before her eyes: plague doctors in masks, faces distorted by screaming, the flame of bonfires, the white coat of the doctor who fell from the tower. And suddenly she saw Marco. He stood motionless, with the camera in his hands. His eyes were wide open, his gaze glassy. The camera trembled, but he did not move. "Marco?" she called. He did not answer. He only slowly raised his head and spoke in a strange voice: "Look at us." She stepped back. Marco took a step forward. The camera turned on, the lens aimed directly at her. On the screen, her own face, pale, with dilated pupils. And in the depth of the frame, behind her back, stood a shadow. Human, tall, with a long silhouette and a mask without eyes. Laura rushed to the exit. The corridors twisted, turned, it seemed, the walls were changing direction. The lantern flickered. Shadows crawled after her. The voices now sounded loud, almost like screams. "Don't leave. Stay. Remember us." She ran out onto the stairs, but Marco stood on the steps. He held the camera, and it continued to film. "You don't understand," he said. "They don't mean harm." "Who, they?" "Those who were here. Those who remember everything." He stepped toward her. "They want someone to tell the story. So they won't be forgotten." He held out his hand. "Stay." Laura stepped back. For a second it seemed to her that all the fog of the island gathered around them, compressing the space. Marco smiled, strangely, calmly. And the next moment he took a step back, into the darkness of the basement. The camera disappeared with him. Laura screamed. The echo spread through the corridor, but there was no answer. Only the sound of water and a slight clinking of metal, as if an invisible bell was swinging somewhere deep down. She ran blindly until she broke out onto the surface. The daylight seemed brighter than before, almost white. The fog began to thin, revealing a view of the lagoon. She stood right by the water, trembling, clutching the voice recorder. She pressed record and said hoarsely, "Poveglia. Day 3rd. Marco is missing." In the basement, they were there. All of them. I heard voices. I saw myself. Maybe it's a hallucination. Maybe, memory. But if someone finds this recording, don't go down. There is no bottom here. Only echo. She stopped the recording and looked at the tower. The bell swung again. And for a moment it seemed to her that Marco was standing at the top. That night she did not light a fire. The fog returned, enveloping the island like a shroud. From afar, the splashing of water and a chime could be heard, quiet, measured, as if the island was calling someone again. Laura sat right on the edge of the shore, looking into the darkness. And suddenly something gleamed in the water. The metal casing of the camera. She retrieved it, turned it on with trembling hands. The screen flashed. On the recording, the underground corridor. Voices. Lantern light. Marco walks forward, turns around. Says, "If they call, don't answer." Laura looked up. The tower stood motionless. All night Laura did not close her eyes. Marco's camera lay nearby, on the wet blanket, like a dead witness. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that moment, his silhouette dissolving in the fog. Sometimes it seemed to her that she heard his steps behind the tent. Sometimes, breathing, almost familiar. At dawn she understood, the island does not let go. But it does not hold by force either. It simply waits until the person himself decides to stay. By noon the fog became clearer. Through it, the lagoon was visible, silver, motionless. Somewhere far away a boat was sailing, but the sound of the motor did not reach. As if the sound died without reaching Poveglia. Laura picked up the radio station, a heavy, old device, found in the attic of the old hospital. She turned on the power. The device hummed, the needle trembled. Click, and the speaker came alive. Laura swallowed. "This is Poveglia. My name is Laura Morelli. If anyone hears, please, answer." In response hissing. "Repeat. I am on Poveglia Island. I am a journalist, the cameraman is missing. I need to evacuate." A long pause. Then, muffled, as if from underwater. "Poveglia. But the island is closed. You can't go there." Further only crackling, and suddenly the voice changed. It became quieter, deeper. Male, familiar, it sounded, "Laura, don't leave." The radio continued to work, the needle darted across the scale, catching fragments of voices, laughter, screams, words in Italian and Latin. All of them merged into one choir. She rushed to the shore. The motorboat they had arrived on stood in the same place. But when she touched the side, she realized, the hull was rusted through. There was no gasoline. As if the boat had lain here for decades. "This cannot be," she whispered. "We were only here for 3 days. 3 days." But on her skin, abrasions, weathered, as if weeks had passed. During the day she tried to record everything, as if this could restore her control. She filmed the tower, the ruins, the bay. Every frame seemed the same, but something new appeared in each one, silhouettes, faces, shadows. They didn't move, they simply were. They were present. In one frame, Marco. Standing at the foot of the tower, looking directly into the camera. She zoomed in on the image, there were no pupils. His face was covered with a thin film of water, like a reflection. And behind him, someone else. A doctor. The very one from the diary. She put the camera down and sat motionless for a long time. In the evening the sky was covered with lead. The fog returned, dense, glowing from within. Laura decided to turn on the radio again, not to be saved anymore, but to say her last words. She tuned the frequency, inhaled, and began to speak. This is Laura Morelli. Poveglia. Day 4, if it exists. We came here with Marco Bellini to film a documentary about the legends. But the legends turned out to be reality. There really are voices here. They say they want to be heard. I heard Marco. His voice, it is different. Perhaps he has become part of the island. She fell silent, but a whisper was heard in the speaker. She flinched. No one leaves here. We are not dead. We are an echo. And silence again. Late at night she saw a light. At first she thought, a boat. But it came from the other side of the island, from the tower. Flickering, steady, as if someone had lit a lantern at the top. She took the camera, the voice recorder, and went there. Every step echoed with a clang, as if dozens of feet were stepping on stone at once. The air thickened, as if the atmosphere itself was watching. Inside the tower, a staircase leading up. On the walls, handprints. She climbed onto the platform. At the top, a bell. The very one spoken of in the legends. It was not ringing, but a low hum emanated from it, similar to a pulse. And nearby, a figure. Marco. Standing with his back turned, looking at the lagoon. Laura froze. Marco. Called out Laura. He did not turn around. I told you, he said, they just want to be heard. Is that you? I am. Just now, here. Later he turned around. His face was calm, but his eyes, empty. He came closer. His hand touched her cheek, cold, like stone. For a second it seemed to her that the tower came alive. Light crept along the walls, like a wave. Voices merged into a single breath. Through the ringing of the bell she heard, now, it's your turn. Marco took a step back and dissolved into the fog. The bell rang by itself. It was not struck. 1, 2, 3 another morning. The shore. On the sand, a backpack, a voice recorder, a camera. The tent was torn away by the wind. No traces. A week later, fishermen from Chioggia noticed a boat drifting without a motor. Inside, only a camera. On the film, 3 hours of recording, the last frames of which showed the tower, drowning in fog. And a female voice off camera, if you see this, it means Poveglia is listening again. The video materials found off the coast of Venice were handed over to journalists. Most experts recognized them as a falsification. But in one of the archives, a sound engineer noticed a strangeness. In the background of every recording, a rhythm was audible, steady, measured, exactly like a heartbeat frequency. When the sound was amplified, it became clear, it was not interference. It was the bell. It rang at an interval of exactly 24 hours. Every day, at the same time.